All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. The writing was on the wall and it became official on Monday as Rick Pitino is leaving Iona to be the new men's basketball coach at St. John's, while Ed Cooley is leaving Providence to take over at Georgetown in a day, in my opinion, that was big for the Big East Conference. Now, Patino has a long and storied basketball career as a head coach, and that includes taking Providence, Kentucky, and Louisville all to the Final Four while winning it all with both Kentucky and Louisville. The past 3 years have shown that Patino has not forgotten how to coach as he led Iona to the NCAA tournament twice. And in my opinion, hiring Patino is a big coup for St. John's as well as the Big East. And I say that because, there's a generation of basketball players and basketball fans who don't know about the glory days of St. John's and when St. John's was a nationally recognized basketball program. Obviously, they've gotten away from that. And St. John's, in my opinion, has been dormant on the college basketball scene for far too long. I mean, you got to go back to the year 2000 to find the last time that the Johnnies won an NCAA tournament game. It was the first round of the 2000 NCAA tournament where they were a two seed out in the West region and then they were bumped out in the second round. But since then, St. John's has only made the tournament four times since 2002. And like I wrote about on 300 pounds of sportsknowledge.com about 10 years ago, I said then that with the new Big East Conference, they needed St. John's and Georgetown to be relevant. And, sticking with St. John's right here, obviously you need the Red Storm to be relevant because of the New York market. And hiring Patino pushes the needle towards that. Patino was a New York City guy. And not only is he a New York City guy, he knows how to recruit the New York area. And he did it at Providence. He did it at Kentucky, most notably getting Jamal Mashburn from the Bronx to go to Kentucky. And then he did it as well at Louisville. And with St. John's, and I've said this before, and I've said it in recent podcasts, in order for the Johnnies to be relevant on the college basketball scene, they have to recruit the New York area. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. St. John's is not a program that is going to go out there and recruit nationally. They have to find a way to keep the local kids local. And it's not just New York City, it's the surrounding areas, Long Island, Westchester, New Jersey, and so forth. They have to get those kids to buy in and stay local. And I think Patino is a guy that can get that done. Um, the Garden will definitely be buzzing again for St. John's basketball. It hasn't been like that in a while. You can make a legitimate argument back to 2011, which was the first year for Steve Lavin as St. John's as head coach, and St. John's rallied that year to make the NCAA tournament, and they pulled off some big wins that year in doing so, and the Garden was buzzing. But I think the Garden will definitely be buzzing again. And Patino has already talked about having all of St. John's Big East home games once again played at Madison Square Garden. It was a scenario where only select teams, played their games against St. John's at Madison Square Garden within the Big East. And you think about the old school Big East, Connecticut, who is obviously still there, Seton Hall, Syracuse, Pitt, Georgetown. And I think getting it back to that will definitely add some excitement. And if St. John's, and I do believe they will, but if they're able to start winning again consistently, you're going to see people come out to Madison Square Garden and support this team. You think back to the 1980s, most notably when St. John's met Georgetown during the regular season. St. John's was ranked number one, Georgetown was ranked number two. You basically had a sold out Madison Square Garden for that game. I think back to 1999 when Duke met St. John's at the Garden in January of 99, and Duke was en route to going to the Final Four that year. St. John's got to the Elite Eight, but nonetheless, we had a epic overtime game that was sold out at the Garden. And of course, if you build it, people will definitely come and support you in New York City. I talked about this when Patino's name was rumored to the St. John's job, as he's going to be a guy that can now say he's coached both the St. John's Red Storm as well as the New York Knicks. And Madison Square Garden is a special building by itself. It's also a special building for basketball. And this is something that Patino knows and he loves too well. He knows about the history of Madison Square Garden. He knows about the history of the Big East because he is part of it, while with both Providence and Louisville. And he knows about the Big East tournament, you name it. So this is going to be a guy that is going to embrace this program from the word go. And I think that's going to be big for them. The other move, of course, in the Big East is Ed Cooley leaving Providence. And I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised. And I'm not surprised from the standpoint that if there was one job out there that would make Ed Cooley leave Providence, it would be the Georgetown job. The allure of it. He had a fondness with former Hoyas head coach, the late John Thompson II. And I think that, in my opinion, is what drove him to this job. And you think about the foundation that was laid at Georgetown by John Thompson II. And I've talked about this before, and I will say it again. John Thompson, his ability as a coach, in my opinion, went way beyond what happened on the basketball court. I think John Thompson was a molder of men. He took boys and turned them into men. And I think Ed Cooley understands that. And I think, Georgetown's one of those special places when it comes to the basketball scene. And I think Ed Cooley has an opportunity to get things turned around for the Hoyas, just like Patino has an opportunity to get things turned around for St. John's. And I say this about Georgetown because this, in my opinion, is a basketball program that is a sleeping giant on the college basketball scene. And when it's in the right hands, they can succeed. Obviously, they did have some success under John Thompson III. His latter years were not the same. Obviously, unfortunately, it never worked out for Patrick Ewing. Obviously, the most recognizable player in the history of the Georgetown program. And in hiring Ed Cooley, Georgetown is doing something that they haven't done since 1971, which is have a head coach not tied to John Thompson II. But they went out of the Georgetown family, but they're looking to get somebody who can restore some order to this program and make them relevant again. And Georgetown needs to be relevant, like I talked about for St. John's, because of the DC market. And most notably, Georgetown has to find a way, just like St. John's, to keep the local kids local. You think about it. Georgetown is at its best when it's getting kids from DC, from Maryland, and Virginia. They've been losing out to the likes of Villanova in recent years for those kids. And Ed Cooley has to find a way to restore that. This will definitely add to the rivalry between Georgetown and Providence. And you think about Georgetown and Providence, not really a rivalry, of course, even though they're in the same conference. It's a scenario, obviously, when you think about Georgetown and Providence, the link is John Thompson II, because John Thompson the second, excuse me, played ball at Providence, but of course, for many years, he was the head coach at Georgetown. And you think, going back to the original Big East, it was kind of a gentleman's agreement that we weren't going to poach each other's head coaches. That obviously is not the case here. There are some people at Providence who are happy for Ed Cooley, and obviously there are going to be fans that are not happy because, number one, he left, but he also left to remain within the Big East at Georgetown. And of course, Ed Cooley probably went from being one of the most beloved people within the city of Providence to now obviously being on the other side of that coin. And you think about Ed Cooley, he's born in Providence. Providence, coaching at Providence for the most part has been his dream job, and he's had success there. But it's a scenario where, unfortunately for Providence, over the years, they've just been unable to keep their head coaches. You think about Rick Pitino after getting Providence to the Final Four, he left to take over the Knicks. You think about Rick Barnes, who had success at Providence, getting them to the NCAA tournament multiple times before he left to take the Clemson job. And you think about Pete Gillen, who got Providence to the Elite Eight in 1997 before he left. it's a very difficult place where, in order to keep quality coaches, and I think Providence, unfortunately, is going to deal with that again. So, what's next for Providence? They're bringing in Kim English, the George Mason head coach, and I think it's going to be an opportunity for him to have some success there. And he's got to go out there and try to take this thing from the ground running. And I say this because the Big East in its heyday was all about his coaches. And we're seeing a room of quality coaches once again. And I've talked about this before, and I'll bring it up again. You think about some of the quality head coaches in this conference: Shaka Smart at Marquette, Ed Cooley, of course, now at Georgetown, leaving Providence, Rick Pitino at St. John's, Sean Miller at Xavier, Thad Matta at Butler, Shaheen Holloway at Seton Hall, Danny Hurley at Connecticut, and Greg McDermott at Creighton. And in the case of Shaka Smart, Rick Pitino, Thad Matta, they've all gotten teams to the Final Four. Sean Miller has gotten to the Elite Eight several times, first with Xavier and then Arizona. Shaheen Holloway got to the Elite Eight last year at St. Peter's. Dan Hurley is a up and comer on the college football scene, and now following the retirement of Jay Wright at Villanova, Greg McDermott is basically the senior guy in the room as far as the quality coaches at these respective clubs or schools, rather, in the Big East Conference. But one thing I will say about both the Patino hire at St. John's as well as the Cooley hire at Georgetown, it would not surprise me, and I could be totally wrong for that, and that's fine. But it would not surprise me that these moves were pushed by the powers that be for the betterment of the league. And it goes back to what I've said before, as far as you need your big markets to be successful to drive up the ratings. And, the Big East, they're looking to get a new basketball deal. They still have some time on their basketball deal with Fox, but they're looking to extend it. I think they will, in my opinion. But nonetheless, it definitely helps you when you go to the bargaining table when your big markets are relevant for your main sport. And of course, the breadwinner and the moneymaker in the Big East Conference is men's basketball. So that's just my opinion on this. I could totally be wrong on this, but nonetheless, you look at it and you wonder, how will things work out for Patino at St. John's, at Cooley at Georgetown? I think the sky is the limit for both of these teams and both of these coaches. And I say this: Patino is going to change things from the word go, because his name alone is going to excite the fan base. His name alone is going to excite the alumni. His name alone is going to put St. John's basketball back on the back pages of the New York City papers. He's going to get the kids, he's going to make them relevant as far as the Big East Conference goes. And again, this is a very competitive basketball conference. You got three teams still dancing in the Sweet 16, three of the five teams that made the NCAA tournament from the Big East. Creighton has a legit chance to advance. Not saying they're going to win the national title, and the same thing can be said for both Xavier and Connecticut. But make no mistake about it, Marquette is a good basketball program under Shaka Smart. Thad Matta is going to get things turned around at Butler. The same thing can be said for Shaheen Holloway at Seton Hall. Danny Hurley has done a tremendous job at Connecticut. You think about Greg McDermott at Creighton. So you have some very good basketball programs in this conference. So I think at the end of the day, I think it's going to happen as far as both of them getting things turned around at their respective schools. Ed Cooley, of course, has got to find a way to get things going recruiting wise in the DC area. But nonetheless, things have changed. You got the NILs, you got the transfer portal, and it's a scenario where you can go out there and really reverse the fortunes of your team very quickly. Providence, for an example, who Ed Cooley just led to the NCAA tournament, had seven guys on their team this year that they got from the transfer portal that were not Providence Friars last year. So that just gives you an idea, excuse me, of how quickly the things can get turned around. But nonetheless, I think this is a banner day for the Big East. Um, this is still a great basketball league. And I talked about this recently, even after the defections and the breakup of the original Big East Conference a decade ago. This is still a phenomenal basketball conference. And I think if you're a St. John's fan, you got to be happy. I think if you're a Georgetown fan, you have to be happy. And at the end of the day, if you're a Providence fan with Kim English, you have to be happy as well. You're sad to see Ed Cooley go, especially going staying within the Big East Conference. But I think Kim English is going to do a solid job at Providence because it's one of those things where Providence is a school, no disrespect to anybody. Basketball wise, they tend to fly under the radar. And just when you've forgotten about Providence, that's when they do their biggest damage. So let's just wait and see what happens at Georgetown, St. John's, and Providence with their new head coaches in the Big East. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.